that's really, really what's motivated me is, one, this concern for yoga teachers down the line, because I know for certain that 99.9% of yoga teachers don't have retirement accounts and aren't putting money away to retire. They're literally just trying to get by. And so what I would say to them is, okay, pause for a moment. You need to stop and look at the bigger picture, because our reality and our circumstance are a direct reflection of the choices that we've made along the way.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, where you can find a large selection of Om and yoga clothing, spiritual jewelry, and unique fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now here's your host, Ashton Sabo.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Savannah Podcast. I'm excited for our guest today. Her name is Katie Brauer. She's a former professional snowboarder, and she's now an international educator, a yoga teacher, inspirational speaker, and creative leader. She's a trailblazer with a modern and empowering approach to personal development and transformation, and she offers online courses, live programs, and retreats to support others in creating an abundant and fulfilling life that they love. Really excited to have her on the show today. Katie, welcome.
Thanks, Ashton. I'm excited to be here.
So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your background. I mentioned in the intro that you used to be a professional snowboarder. You were ranked as one of the top in the world at one point. Tell us about that background and how you eventually got into yoga.
Okay, I'll start by saying I'm a total dinosaur, because that was a really long time ago. But how I got into yoga was actually during my snowboarding career. And my initial discipline in snowboarding was border cross. It was like very aggressive. So I had an interesting childhood, and I had a lot of aggression as a kid, and also a lot of drive. So border cross was something that really appealed to me. If you're not familiar with border cross, it's where at that time it was 6 people would go down an obstacle course at the same time with berms and jumps and whatnot, and it was really an all-out fight. Whoever got to the bottom first would continue on to the next round. And so my coach at the time recommended that I get into some yoga classes. He said, you're really uptight. You could benefit from de-stressing a little bit, and you're also really tight in your body. And so that was my first introduction. That was in 1999. And I actually didn't have a great experience, my first yoga class. It was very, what I say, woo-woo. It was a lot of Sanskrit. There was a lot of heavy breathing. There really wasn't any context to what we were doing. And it was so foreign from my background in athletics and everything that I had been exposed to that it just made me feel really uncomfortable. And the experience was very strange. And it was strange enough that I didn't go back. And it felt really uncomfortable in my body. And I was used to being very good at things. And this was something that I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that were being taught. And so there was this sort of inner competition with myself. And also it just felt really, really uncomfortable. So I had never really had an experience that was it took me into a very uncomfortable place very quickly. And I didn't feel that I had the support from the teacher to support me in that place. So it was just too scary. It didn't go back for actually a fair while. And then about a year later, I jumped into another class, and it was a completely different experience, totally different approach and style. And then I was like, oh, okay. And that's how I began. And it really was for me in the beginning a physical practice. In the beginning of my yoga experience, I really got into, getting all the crazy poses and inversions and arm balances. And I thought that was the point. And throughout my snowboarding career, a couple of years after that, I had a really horrific accident, among many, because I had a lot of surgeries. But this one in particular was not only physically devastating, it was emotionally devastating. And what had worked for me in rehabbing my first ACL reconstruction didn't work this time. And I got curious about meditation and visualization. I went to the Vail Library. I lived in Colorado at the time, and I started honestly just to read books about these different things that yoga offered, which I had never really been exposed to. And as an experiment, and really in a place of desperation, I started trying these breathing techniques and these visualizations and meditations and learning about the chakras. And lo and behold, I started healing, and the inflammation in my body and my knee went down. And I began having these really interesting, bizarre experiences that were unexplainable. So that really piqued my curiosity, and I was like, I don't know what is going on, but I want to know more. So that was in 2001, and ever since then I've literally been down the rabbit hole, and I find yoga to be a very satiating conversation and exploration. So
Well, it's interesting hearing about your first yoga experience too, knowing what I know of you and both how you teach and the way that you teach teachers to teach, and how you can really kind of hear that, like, okay, well, let's make it more accessible to people. Let's make it so they're not feeling disempowered by the way that the physical part is being taught, or even I guess we could say the containers being held by the teacher in terms of the languaging that they're using. I know that you're a big stickler on languaging and things like that, of really empowering people into the space instead of making it some very mysterious, inaccessible thing that maybe only the teacher has. It's like, no. This is something we're all bathing in, so let's kind of access it together in a way that makes sense together, which I like hearing that about your first yoga experience then, because it sounds like
it's really, definitely from my first experience, that obviously I think experiences in general influence all of us in the way in which we show up. But for me, in guiding and teaching teachers, my real philosophy is really about how do you adjust the dial skillfully to whoever is showing up in your class. And for me, that teacher absolutely had the ability to connect with me where I was at, but for whatever reason didn't. And so that's something that I've always strived personally, to be able to meet people where they are, and really take on the fact that, especially if someone's in my class for the first time, or they're taking yoga for the first time, there's a ripe opportunity, and there's a huge possibility that if they have a poor experience, they're not going to come back. And then they're losing this gift of yoga, which has been incredibly transformational in my life, and really life-enhancing for myself and the tens of thousands of people that I've known and seen and been able to reach through yoga. So that would be unfortunate. So that's why I'm very passionate about it.
Well, and I love it too, because it points to something that I think is very important for yoga teachers in particular, is that when you go into that room and you're holding that space, it's not about you, it's about the student. So I know there are teachers that are like, well, this is the way that I teach and this is who I am, and so this is my offering, and that's great. But I think, kind of as you said, there's a very skillful way of saying, okay, honor that and recognize that it's not actually about you, it's about your students. So how can you connect to them and make them feel empowered through it? One of the things that I want to talk to you about today is this sort of change in the scenery of how yoga is starting to be taught. Both you and I have online courses. We've got mentorship programs. We're seeing this shift, I think, from the 200-hour Yoga Alliance, very cookie cutter. Even though there is quite a bit of range allowed in there, it still ends up being very small. I mean, the hours thing is something that I've always kind of championed against. Is like 200 hours. Like, your esthetician needs 1,000 hours, and someone who's supposed to know nutrition and basic ideas of the human mind and anatomy and physiology and all this. 200 hours. It's fine. But what I want to talk about is how do you think that this shift from online learning and all these different things we have now with technology is going to impact how yoga is being not only taught in the West, but also received by students or in the world, really?
Yeah, it is. It's a really interesting, I think, evolution that's happening right now. One of the benefits that I feel is happening by this accessibility that's been made available by the online platform is that teachers that have years and years of experience and now accessible by people anywhere. And I know a lot of people that take my classes and my courses online, there's no chance that they would be able to be able to afford to come out to San Diego and get accommodation and that type of thing to do an immersion type program or even a 3-month program. And that's something that they can do from the town that they live in, wherever it is in the world. And I will say that I personally had my own resistance about doing online stuff. I had a belief about it that was that you couldn't really connect with people online. And at the beginning of about a year ago, I was, it came up again. I'd always have people emailing me and asking, why don't you do anything online? And I offer classes online and that type of thing, but courses I hadn't. And I thought, this is a good thing for me to actually inquire about. Like, what is my resistance to doing it? And I realized that I had this belief that I couldn't really create a connection that was authentic online. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to take that first Yoga Sutra, Hatha Yoga Anushasanam, and now the inquiry, and I'm going to do an experiment. And I put together this program for empowered living, and I launched it, and it sold out. And I went through the experience of, doing these online classes each week. And I was completely blown away that the community that was created, my ability to connect with these people, to build authentic relationships, to create shift and change, I was honestly shocked. It was as powerful as being in person. People were having breakdowns, people were having breakthroughs, people are crying. How much I love that when I can support someone in therapeutically crying and working through their stuff. And it was amazing. And that online community is still there, and they're still extremely interactive with one another, and they're a support system for one another. So I think that it is an incredible tool that is really making experts in the field available on a grander scale. So I think that it's going to ultimately up-level and support the evolution of teachers and support them in their growth. So although I was once resistant, I am, and I would poo-poo it. I will eat my words and say that I'm a believer. I'm an advocate, and I've seen it happen. I've experienced it. So I'm all for it.
Well, and I know you're a big advocate of empowering students, but a big part of your work is empowering teachers. And I know a lot of the work that you do, and something that we both really believe strongly in, is that this poverty mindset with teachers, that somehow it's like a desirable thing for a teacher to be struggling, and a yoga teacher to be struggling and suffering along because they have no attachment to things and things like that. Where it's created a situation where we've got a lot of amazing teachers that struggle just to pay their bills each month because they're not recognizing that in our Western world the context is different than in India, for example. And you're essentially, especially most places, you're an independent contractor as a yoga teacher, so you are your own business. And I think it's great how committed you are to making sure that yoga teachers are successful and have abundance. And it's not just kind of struggling along that. There is, while there's the whole personal side of personal transformation, exploration of yoga, there's the whole practice side, there's the whole anatomy side, there's all this stuff, but there's also the business side. And since we're kind of talking about this already, what advice would you give teachers, just as sort of a standard idea of what they can do to be more successful, both personally and professionally, but specifically professionally in their lives, to start to really empower more teachers to live abundantly so they can give more of themselves because they're not stressed out about their next paycheck or when the next bill is coming and everything else?
Right. Well, first of all, I want to say I genuinely care about yoga teachers and them in, when they're 50, 60, 70, retiring. I feel incredibly called to continue my work in supporting them for a long-term strategy, because I think yoga teachers they're being of service, and they're really contributing to the world in such a positive way and a life-enhancing way. And I genuinely am concerned for the well-being of them, because the majority of yoga teachers are creatives, and that's what makes them phenomenal in teaching and sequencing and connecting with people. where there's lacking is in the business sense and the long-term strategy. So that's really what I help yoga teachers with. I wanted to just point out that to your point of, a mindset of having things and being materialistic is un-yogic. I think that yoga teachers fall into two categories. There's definitely a category of teachers within that umbrella. There's definitely a category of teachers that are resistant to living in this modern world and having things like a MacBook Air or, a pair of designer jeans and a nice car. And I think that makes them less yogic, but that really is a very old school limiting way of, if you're living in the Western world, you're a part of the Western world. So like if that's your mindset, all the more power to you. Go live in India, or go and live in an isolated place where it's more supportive of that way of living. And it's not that that's wrong, but I think that that's one mindset. The other mindset is that there is, and I don't think this is just limited to the yoga community. I think it's, much more global across many industries, but there's a lot of wounding around money. And this real, over my years of interacting literally with thousands of teachers, the number one complaint that I hear from teachers is I'm burned out and I'm broke. I love what I do. I'm burned out and I'm broke. And that to me is just really sad. One, I think there's an opportunity to do a deep dive for teachers into what is the wounding and the belief system that they have around money, because yoga it's a $10 billion industry. So if there isn't an abundance flowing, that's an opportunity to really look at, okay, what's lined up and where am I not skillfully engaging and what could I change? But really at the root of it is our belief system around money. And I have a course coming out soon, which is about you and money and creating abundance. Because for me, fortunately, I realized through my own inquiry, I was born into the womb of a woman that had a phenomenal outlook on making things happen. My mom is a single mom of 3 kids. Whatever we wanted or needed, she always was like, I have no idea how I'm going to make that happen, but we'll find a way. And she always did. And I definitely, absolutely inherited that mindset. And when I began my journey, coming back to your actual question of like, what can yoga teachers do? When I realized, when Pandora's box opened for me and I was like, whoa, this is cool. I felt like I took the blue pill, was it, in the Matrix? And all of a sudden I was in the Matrix. And I realized, at the time I was teaching Pilates and I was doing massage therapy. And this was during my snowboarding career. I had this side business of wellness because I was so passionate about it. Even though I didn't need to work, I was just loved being with people and offering and learning. And when I realized that yoga was it for me, I said, okay, this is it for me. This is my platform. This is how, first of all, one, I'm not interested in being a poor yoga teacher, because even at that time, 20 years ago, I saw a lot of people that were struggling with that. And two, what's my long-term strategy? And that's something that I have always been really good at. I think part of it comes from athletics and being, setting goals and breaking them down to actually achieve them. But that was what I did. I sat down and I went through, okay, how many classes do I want to teach? I personally, I've never taught more than 8 classes a week ever in my entire yoga career. For me, classes I saw as a vehicle and a funnel to other things. So they were my touch point in the community, but really from an economical standpoint and an investment of my time, and the money return was, okay, workshops, privates, retreats, corporate yoga, trainings, intensives, teacher trainings, that type of thing. That's where I ultimately want to shift people to Because number one, I mean, especially for a teacher training, the fact that I can have someone's attention for 3 months versus 60 minutes in a class, that for me is huge, because I know that I can really make a difference in that person's life and impart a lot more tools and support their growth. The secondary, motivator is that that's a good use of my time, because it's a good return on the investment of time. And so I think the thing for yoga teachers to do is to get really clear about what's the long-term strategy. What do they ultimately want to do? Because there's many teachers that have no interest in teaching a teacher training, but they may be interested in corporate yoga, and corporate yoga is an extremely lucrative business. I have done that as part of my repertoire, and it was phenomenal. I just got too busy, so I ended up giving my contracts to other teachers that, were sort of up and coming through the ranks. But that's phenomenal. And I think continuing to check in with your strategy, and this is part of why I've created my mentorship program on supporting teachers in the business of yoga, and in 2017 launching a business school for yoga teachers, really to share with them the blueprint that I've used. Because it's not difficult. It's like creating wealth. It's easy actually to create wealth. You invest a little bit of money over a long period of time, and at the end of your life, you're going to have a sizable retirement account. And that is the same for your yoga career. If it's something that you want to have longevity in, you need to have a strategy, one, and you need to be consistent in the effort that you're putting forth. And the last piece, and this is something that blows my mind, of the hundreds and hundreds of teachers that I've graduated from teacher training, at the end of the program and throughout the program, I always say, I'm here for a resource. If you need anything, support, have questions, whatnot, just feel free to reach out. Now, over the many years that I've been doing it, I could count on maybe 2 hands the amount of teachers that have actually taken that, reached out, and ask questions of what should I do? How should I do this? What are the next steps? And those small handful of people, they're all thriving and they're successful. And I think that there's resources always at our fingertips, and it's up to individuals to ask for help, because you want to look at someone that's done it, that's doing it, that's created it, and ask them, what did you do? Because then you can save yourself a ton of time. And that's really, really what's motivated me is, one, this concern for yoga teachers down the line, because I know for certain that 99.9% of yoga teachers don't have retirement accounts and aren't putting money away to retire. They're literally just trying to get by. And so what I would say to them is, okay, pause for a moment. You need to stop and look at the bigger picture, because our reality and our circumstance are a direct reflection of the choices that we've made along the way. So,
well, I think that's something that you touch on. That one, I know just from you personally that you're extremely skilled at is creating a plan and sticking to it. But I also think that's something that, just like you, most of the teachers that I interact with have no plan. They have no vision. They're just like, oh, I'm just teaching yoga. Like, their plan was to teach yoga. And then they got there and that was it. It was like, wait, but you need a bigger plan. And so getting people to really start to create it. And some people haven't even gotten to that level of big picture. When I ask teachers well, where do you see yourself in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? They're like, oh, I don't know. I've never thought about that before. But if you were to ask an athlete or someone in business that question, they would typically have an answer right off the bat. Well, in 3 years, I'm going to be here. In 5 years, I'm going to be there. But in yoga, it doesn't. And again, I think there's probably some truth to the minds of I don't want to be stuck on anticipating things and getting caught up in projection, which I'm sure there's some valid conversation that, but a lot of times it's just it's not being taught, it's not being supported. And as you said too, a lot of times they're just not taking the support of hey, there is an opportunity. I hear all the time that teachers, they feel like they're on an island, that they have no support. And while I think that's very true in some cases, I also think there's just a lack of willingness to seek support. or a platform where that's being offered. And I think part of that in our role as you know, I'm putting the air quotes around it of like senior teachers, but teachers that have been teaching for a long time and have success in it, of like creating avenues for other teachers like you and I are both doing, of like, okay, here we are, we can come to us and you can talk about these types of things. But really that willingness to step out and see the big picture as you're seeing, to receive help, ask for help, is such an important part to raise the bar for yoga teachers.
And it's also really vulnerable, because asking for help requires a certain level of opening up and being vulnerable. And that's really scary for people, especially in this world where, you know, people in general want to quote unquote look good. And so when people do reach out, it is such an honor, honestly, to be able to support them and usher them, because I know for a lot of people, it's really, myself included, it's very difficult to ask for help. And resting into the principle of the Kula, you know, and this expanded network and support system is not something that our society in general supports, you know, is conducive to. So I think that it's good. I think it's good. But if you are a struggling yoga teacher, it doesn't, I mean, what I will say is it doesn't have to be. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to be struggling. It doesn't mean that it's not going to take hard work, but that doesn't need to be your reality. So seek someone close to you, or seek out people online, seek out people that are actually doing it, that have made the strides, that have created something. Maybe it's not exactly what you want, but they're exemplifying the behavior. They, you know, have themselves set up for financial success. They're not living paycheck to paycheck, because they're walking the path, and they can really be insightful and supportive.
Well, I want to change gears a little bit with that, to shift from teachers more to students. And of course, all teachers are students as well. But one of the things that just knowing from you've changed, you've made some pretty dramatic changes in your life at multiple times. I mean, from professional athlete to yogi, you owned a studio, you helped run, you were the program director for a very large yoga company. You've done all kinds of different things in your life. And I think in the world today, especially in the United States, like there's a lot of crazy change going on right now. And I think making change is often a scary and difficult process. What advice can you give, knowing so much that how much of the work that you do is about empowering people to make more deliberate choices and live the lives that they want to live? What advice can you give our listeners who want to make some big changes or are about to make big changes, of how we can kind of integrate this stuff and make those choices skillfully?
Right. Yeah. Change can be extremely overwhelming. And it literally can freeze people or cripple them, and so they just don't make any change whatsoever. And so a year goes by, 2 years goes by, a decade goes by, and it's still the same complaints and whatnot. And so I can completely understand how overwhelming change can be. And what I would say is, you know, I use this analogy, and myself, Danny, and a friend of ours, Kobe, use this analogy in our teaching, which really seems to resonate with people and support this sense of empowerment, is rather than looking at all the big changes that need to happen, focus on just what's one thing that you could do differently. Do that one thing. That's all you need to do, and start there. It's like the rudder on a sailboat. If you shift it 1 degree, that sailboat's going to end up in a completely different destination. And that's the same with our lives, is if you change just one thing, you're going to get a different outcome. And that's the place to start, really, is identifying the one thing and doing that. And then what will happen is you begin to get some momentum when you see shift and change in a positive sense happening. And instead of the overwhelm, then you have this excitement about doing one more thing, and then one more thing, and the motor of your life and this forward momentum really begins to happen. And I think that is what gives people a sense of aliveness, because through, you know, as scary as that one thing might be, when they do it, there really is a sense of accomplishment and being proud and courageous, and that then there's an impulse to do it again and to do it again and to do it again. So that's what I really encourage. I would say for me throughout my life and a lot of the changes and shifts that I've gone through, the evolutions, has been this willingness to recognize the discomfort or the fear, if you will, and to do it anyway. And I've gotten so comfortable in the uncomfortableness. So for me now, the unknown is always very, very exciting. For a lot of people, the unknown is totally paralyzing. And it takes practice. So.
And is that shift from paralyzing to exciting, do you feel that shift is most skillfully navigated by, as you said, just taking one task at a time? Or do you have or do you have additional insights of like what can help bridge that gap for people? Are there additional tools that you would suggest to making that leap, or is it just a process? Hey, you gotta do the time. You gotta go through the process.
Well, I think that something for me that was very revelatory, this was a long time ago, was I was really clear. I got really clear about, what am I here to do? What's the undercurrent of what I want my life to be about? And that undercurrent for me, it was, I want to be able to support people, connect with people, and share the wisdom and experience that I have in them feeling better about themselves and up-leveling their health and empowering them, basically. So from that point, I realized, okay, every single choice that I make is either taking me and supporting that or taking away from and not supporting that. So things on a day-to-day basis became really, really easy to navigate through. If someone asked me out to a party, sometimes I would want to go. Sometimes I'm like, that's actually not supportive for me. And this actually just happened to me recently in the last week because I've shifted with work again and I have some space that's opened up. I've had people reaching out, can I grab coffee? Can I go out to I haven't seen you in forever. And so over the last few weeks, I've said yes. And then last week I was just like, no, because this is, I'm more committed to what I'm creating at the moment, which is for yoga teachers and my empowerment program for the general public, than I am to like going and having a juice smoothie with someone I haven't seen in a while. And maybe that sounds obnoxious, but
well, what I'm hearing from you is that it's about having a strong connection to your why, right? Of like, the reason behind things, and even no matter how well you've planned around that why, that what's going to help you get through those unexpected moments and those big changes and shifts is that you're still connected to that bigger why. And I think that's really important for people, that because it's not something that's encouraged in our culture very much. Our culture says, go to school, get a job, find something you can make money at, and just keep doing it. Get your house, get your this, and get your stuff. But it's not about like, what's the bigger picture of why you were put on this? We weren't put on this earth to be consumers, but that's the model of our culture. So I love that emphasis on the why.
A lot of people in general have never really pondered that question, and the why in teaching. When I'm teaching teachers, that question comes up so much. Not just why are you a yoga teacher, but why did you choose to sequence that in that particular way? Why did you choose that music? Because being in the why really creates a curiosity, and then there's immense learning in that. And I love Simon Sinek's book, Start With The Why, and his TED Talk, if people don't have a chance to read the book. But I don't think people contemplate the why. Mm-hmm. And I, for myself, at times in my life, especially when I'm overwhelmed and I tend to take on a lot, I'll sit down and I'll say to myself, like, why am I doing this? And then I'll sit down and I'll write out all of the reasons why I'm doing it. And then that really fuels my fire and gets me jazzed up to keep going. Because at the end of the day, I mean, creating anything, it takes work. And just going back to what can yoga teachers do? Do the work.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's something that personally and professionally I really respect about you, because you're one of the hardest workers I've ever met. And you've got a plan, you're executing it, you're sticking to it. And it's something that I very much respect in what you do. So, and I'm sure you had mentioned earlier about your mother. I'm sure your mother's very proud of the work you do, because you're a pit bull. Like, you get out there and you go after it. And I love that, because you're still connected to your why. You're not doing it to make millions of dollars and do all this. You're doing it because you care about people, you want to share with people. And so I think that's another important piece for people, is like, there's nothing wrong with money. If you're doing it for the money, that's going to show, and you're going to suffer. You're going to be in that mindset, I need more. If you're doing it for your why, that's a passion that's bigger than yourself, bigger than just accumulating stuff for yourself, then the whole world starts to open up. And in those moments when it doesn't and it knocks you down, it's okay, because you're connected to that why still, and you know why you're working, you know why you're putting in the hard work. And for myself, being back in the United States for the past 5-ish years now, maybe getting close to 6, it's the same thing. I struggle a lot of like, oh man, like, this is tough here in the world. Like, I want to be back on a nice little island living in the tropics. That's easy. And then just being connected to the why is what has kept me here and doing the work, because I know it's about more than just comfort for myself. And that's through the connections, that's through staying with the why. And I really appreciate you for that mirror back of like, hey, stay connected to your why, do the work, and you'll get the success, because you're an example of that, which I very much appreciate. So all of this inside, I mean, we were talking about sort of raising the bar for teachers and really inspiring both people and teachers in this community to make changes. Where can people find out about the work that you do to help support people in that?
On my website, katiebrauer.com, and my name's spelled KatieBrauer.com. Everything's up on there, and I'm on Facebook. I honestly tend not to spend very much time on social media because it ends up being a huge energy and time suck, which I don't have time for, especially being a mom and a busy working lady. But yeah, online on my website, that's where people can find me.
And you also have some projects coming up soon in 2017 as well, correct?
Yeah, my Flourish program for empowered living, I'm running that again in the new year. It has been a phenomenal experience in the past, and all the graduates, I mean, it really, really, it's the program that completely shifted the way that I thought about online learning. And it actually opened me up to actually taking trainings online, because I personally had been resistant to taking trainings online. And so the Flourish program, that's running in January of 2017. So people can find out about that online and get on the list to find out when registration opens. And at the moment, I am in the midst of running a mentorship program for yoga teachers and yoga professionals, and really sharing with them support, the blueprint that I've used for my career. That's a very small group program that will run again in the spring of next year, so people can find out about that online as well. And then the biggest project that's taking up a lot of my time right now is this online business school with resources and whatnot for yoga teachers. So you'll see that coming in the spring of 2017, depending. We'll see. I do know that I set my goals that are very lofty, and then oftentimes I will kill myself meeting that goal. But what I've started doing just recently, like yesterday, is, okay, instead of killing myself, I can move out a deadline. But the goal is spring of 2017.
Well, I don't know if this means much, but I'm proud of you, Katie, for doing that. So
I'm a work in progress.
Yes.
But,
we all are.
When you were talking about goals, I started laughing because I was talking about this the other day when I went on a date with my husband. The first time I sent him home with a goal sheet. I'm like, that is how goal oriented I am. He just thought I was a complete mad woman, but here we are.
Well, I'm glad, because one, that's kept you in that space to achieve some wonderful things and impact a lot of people. And I'm glad that the reins are loosening a little bit on that too. So you're taking more time, and it's something I've seen kind of third hand through social media and everything else. But I feel like your motherhood has changed you and softened you in a lot of really wonderful, impactful ways. So that's been really nice to see. Maybe that's having some impact. Okay, I've got my goals, and I can kind of get to cut it back a little bit and all that. I think for everyone, it's a really interesting journey of balance, of finding out, okay, well, yes, let's really put wonderful energy into work so that we can impact people and recognize another why of why we're doing it, so we can have those connections with our family and friends and people close to us. So it's fun seeing your journey. I love the work that you do in the community, so thank you so much for that. For all of our listeners out there, I hope you've learned something listening today. I'm sure you have. Please check out the work that Katie does. She's a phenomenal teacher and leader in our community. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you have a present moment. Namaste. Hey everybody, quick message here to let you know about our special Facebook group, Savannah East. It's a place where both listeners of the podcast and guests, as well as people that visit our blog site, Savannah East, can come together and connect, ask questions about episodes or articles. I'm on there quite regularly as well, so I'm happy to interact if you have questions. If you have ideas or guests for the show, go on there and post them as well. We really appreciate entering in the conversation together. Hope to see you there.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaheast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.